globally. They are the only marine plants on the planet.
After you, please. You guys are the main event. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Excellent. First off, congratulations for making it here. We recognise this COP has not been without its logistical challenges. I, for one, lost my badge this morning, so a big congrats for being here. My name is Tom Hickey. I'm with the Pew Charitable Trusts. I work on our coastal wetlands and NDC programme. That's a body of work that supports countries who have the ambition to include coastal wetlands, mangroves, seagrasses and salt marshes within their nationally determined contributions. A body of work you're going to hear a little bit more about this morning. We hope that this discussion is very timely to this COP on two levels. Firstly, that of nature-based solutions. We are in the Nature Hub, so no great shock there. I'm sure that many of us will remember COP25, the Blue COP in Madrid, the Glasgow Pact, the subsequent Ocean Climate Dialogue mandated in Germany this year. And that platform, I think, has really solidified the growing awareness of the role that nature-based solutions can bring. Of course, the dialogue is not limited to nature-based solutions, it focuses on technical solutions as well. But these three ecosystems are right at the very forefront of that discourse. That's partly because they have measurable mitigation benefits. They are the only marine ecosystems with IPCC guidance as things stand. But they also provide a whole range of benefits for adaptation, buffering shorelines, supporting resilient fisheries. And that triple benefit to people, to nature and climate is hugely symbolic of the power that conservation can bring. Secondly, and probably more importantly, it's not just symbolic, it's actionable. And this COP is all about action and implementation. We have been sat, I'm sure, in similar forums such as these over the years, talking about the potential of nature-based solutions, latterly talking about excellent commitments. But today you're going to hear a little bit about implementation, about work that's already ongoing, about practical engagement to translate that potential of nature into reality. And Pew has been thrilled to work with all three countries before you here, and we're delighted that we will continue that journey with you in the coming years, as well as expanding the number of partnerships we're currently going to work with. So it's our hope, I stress hope, to work with at least 5 further countries, both in the Western Indian Ocean and Latin America, Caribbean, to provide similar support. You may also have seen yesterday that we are specifically hoping to expand our engagement on seagrasses, which I'm sure Minister Joubert will be able to allude to in a little more detail. You have a fantastic panel here to give you a flavour of some of that work. To my immediate left, the Honourable Minister Orlando Abbott, Minister in the Government of Belize for Sustainable Development and Climate Change. Next across, Minister Joubert, Mr. Flavien Joubert, I apologise, Minister of Climate Change and Environment in the Government of Seychelles. And last but by no means least, Ms. Rita Zagul, Environment and Energy Minister for the Government of Costa Rica and Coordinator of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. I'm going to invite each of our panelists to provide some opening remarks, and then we'll move to a little bit of Q&A. But before that, we're going to try and show you a video about how some of these partnerships work in practice.
The conservation and sustainable management of nature is a complicated issue. Nature is complex, so we need to embrace that complexity.
The coastal wetlands provide essential ecosystem services. But what does that mean?
Mangroves and seagrass are very important ecosystems. In fact, we even refer to them as blue carbon ecosystems. Their intricate root systems help to hold the soil together along the coast, thereby preventing erosion and helping to stabilize the land.
The seagrass habitats as well as mangroves are habitats for marine biodiversity, nurseries for many species of fish. They are supporting livelihoods.
They also provide home to many species that tourists are attracted to, the manatees, for example. Seagrass and mangroves provide habitat and feeding grounds for these species.
They are sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, storing them into the soil and locking it, assisting us in combating the impacts of climate change. They're a triple benefits ecosystem.
The policy makers need to be aware that by conserving mangroves, by protecting them and restoring them, the environmental benefits that the country can obtain surpass the investment needed for that.
Belize is a small country with very small amounts of greenhouse gas emissions. Nevertheless, we are endeavoring to be a leader in encouraging other countries to mitigate and to adapt to climate change.
We wanted to make sure that we can increase ambition for protection and restoration of these important ecosystems, and we wanted to do it from a very science-based approach as well as a very transparent and consultative process.
6.5.
What the country did is work with partners such as World Wildlife Fund, the Pew Charitable Trust, and other NGO and government partners.
We decided to protect and to restore areas that have mangroves. Up to 2025, we will protect 6,000 hectares, and we want to map the amount of seagrasses that we have in our coastal areas, and we want to implement measures in order to protect and to restore seagrass. It is our hope that other countries may look at our example and may follow that example to restore and to protect our blue carbon systems.
When you look at Seychelles, the way the economy works, a lot of the activities we do, they depend on the integrity of the natural environment.
It's absolutely important for the Seychelles to be protecting its mangrove and seagrass ecosystems. The mapping of seagrass across the entire EEZ of the Seychelles, and including doing below-surface carbon stocks assessments, is one ambitious endeavor by a small island developing state.
Oftentimes we talk about protection, but we don't ensure that the beneficiaries understand what we mean by protection and they don't see the benefits of protection.
Things that people do not believe have value are not given a name. There wasn't a Creole word for seagrass. Through this seagrass mapping project, we decided to really go down to the community, to connect the community to international policy making. Through a process of voting for which word would be preferred, we will institutionalize the word for seagrass and hopefully have the word actually integrated into the Creole dictionary.
We know, because of the mapping exercises that the country has done, that although mangroves are protected in the country, they've been lost at a rate of around 14,000 hectares in the last 20 years. There is a very large amount of carbon that's being lost because of that loss in mangrove cover.
Costa Rica ha sido líder en la implementación de algunas de las soluciones basadas en naturaleza en la región, ya que cuenta con una gran trayectoria de mapeo, además de sus áreas silvestres protegidas, de una gran conservación, de medidas de conservación normativa y técnica que le permite darle un seguimiento al cambio de estos ecosistemas.
We're very fortunate in Costa Rica because we were able to match scientific knowledge with political will and institutional capacities to include these conservation, restoration, and sustainable management targets within Costa Rica's NDC.
Organizations like Conservation International, local NGOs, Pew Charitable Trust work together with the government, and that's the important part.
Últimamente se ha reforzado muchísimo lo que es la ciencia ciudadana y también escuchar esa voz ciudadana que ha implementado soluciones ancestrales, ¿verdad?, que han dado muy buenos resultados.
What Costa Rica is doing is just putting forward this important message that restoring, conserving, and bringing communities and, of course, governments and local stakeholders for effective management of these ecosystems is something that every country needs to do.
The role of partnerships and community engagement in the development of these policies is something we're going to hear a lot more about throughout this discussion, but we hope that gives you a flavor of just how involved translating potential into reality with nature-based solutions is. Minister Abbott, I wonder if I could give you the floor to start things off.
Okay, a pleasant good morning, everyone, and to my colleagues from Costa Rica and Seychelles. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and I firstly want to thank you for the invitation. And so, as a participant on this panel, I would like to commence by saying that Belize, like so many small island developing states, is on the front line of the impacts of this changing climate. Our coastal communities are vulnerable to increasingly extreme weather conditions, to coastal erosion and sea level rise. As a matter of fact, we have one of our one-time largest communities now being affected by coastal erosion, and apparently there's nothing else that we can do but maybe even relocate them because of the migration that has occurred due to that coastal erosion. We have sustained droughts and extreme temperatures which impact our crops and our livestock. Our coral reefs, including the longest barrier reef in the Western Hemisphere, and they tell us that it is now the largest living barrier reef and is refuge for globally significant biodiversity and keystones for various livelihoods and threatened by warming and more acidic waters. While a relatively minor contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, though, Belize has outlined goals to mitigate the impacts of our energy, agriculture, waste, and industrial processes and product sectors. However, at the heart of our updated NDCs are efforts to steward, to conserve and restore our natural resources, notably, of course, our forests, wetlands, and marine ecosystems. Belizeans recognize that tackling the climate and biodiversity crises must go hand in hand. They both must be addressed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, we cannot forget the other area for the triple planetary crisis, which is pollution, which largely also comes from inland. Our blue carbon, mangrove, and seagrass ecosystems play many important roles as a nature-based solution to climate change with mitigation, adaptation, and resilience co-benefits. These ecosystems sequester and store significant amounts of carbon. They help to prevent flooding of low-lying areas on the mainland. They safeguard our frontline communities and infrastructure for climate impacts, and they build, of course, greater resilience. They are the perfect example of how the protection and restoration of nature can contribute to our shared climate efforts, which is a triple win for Belize, by contributing to the national carbon sink, addressing sea level rise and coastal erosion, while expanding habitat for biodiverse resources and supporting a more resilient tourism and aquaculture industry. That is why we have included specific measurable targets to their conservation and restoration in our NDCs. We will double the existing levels of mangrove protection with at least a further 6,000 hectares of new protections by 2025 and a further 6,000 hectares by 2030. We will also restore at least 2,000 new hectares of mangroves by 2025 and a further 2,000 by 2030. This is as a part of our Bond Challenge commitments. We will assess the climate benefits of Belize's seagrass ecosystems to inform the development of national seagrass policy. And we will work to the inclusion of our blue carbon values in our national greenhouse gas inventory. However, like I suspect my fellow panelists, while Belize is proud of these commitments, we are 100% sure to endorse the key theme of this COP, which is implementation. We cannot have only commitments. We have to bring these commitments into action. So what have we learned so far? In terms of community engagement, communities, local values, including culture and skills, need to be brought in at the earliest stage. These are not merely agents for implementation, but foundational to the effective policy design. The development of our updated NDC included broad stakeholder engagement, including participation of vulnerable populations, and was validated through engagement with a technical committee of sector leads, including representation from indigenous peoples. This means that as we begin implementation, these goals are owned by Belizeans. In terms of partnerships, I would echo and stress the importance of partnerships. Belize is the first country in the region to have a comprehensive national level estimate of mangrove carbon. And I am told somewhere around 25.7 teragrams of carbon. And in terms of, I was just told that it represents a large proportion of what would be the emissions emanated by so many vehicles in the United States. This technical output was developed through a highly collaborative research project that was designed and executed in collaboration with 14 different organizations or agencies, including WWF, Pew, the Smithsonian, and the University of Belize, alongside other government departments. Effective partnerships not only support government ambitions, but do so in a way that helps to further strengthen the local capacities that we need to be successful. So in terms of nature-based solutions, these efforts speak not only to our commitment to safeguard and restore these vital ecosystems within Belize, but to contribute to the shared growing global awareness of the benefits that nature-based solutions can bring. Coastal wetlands bring a triple benefit in addressing climate change: measurable blue-bond carbon mitigation values recognized by IPCC methodologies, but also critical benefits in helping communities adapt and become more resilient. Our interest in nature-based solutions, and in particular, marine nature-based solutions, is growing. These ecosystems are at the forefront of that awareness, and our success in delivering these commitments will yield key lessons for that broader dialogue. We cannot deny, though, the fact that these ecosystems are endangered if uncontrolled and unplanned development occurs, especially for our countries that now depend largely on tourism as a large contributor to GDP, and of course, a significant contributor to livelihoods. So, sustainability is center and key to planning and policy. It is my pleasure to highlight to you Belize's continued commitment to our natural resources for people, nature, and climate. And I would like to encourage everyone else to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'm struck by one comment you made there about the value of stakeholder engagement and community engagement, that it's not just democratic, it's effective. It's about bringing those values and those representations into policy creation, not just paying lip service. I think it's a very important theme that we'll hear more and more about. Minister Joubert, I'd like to give you the floor.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Colleagues, ministers from Costa Rica and also from Belize. all our guests in the room, my colleagues from Seychelles also. I can see a few of them at the back. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to share some of the ambitions of Seychelles on protection of marine ecosystems, in particular the ones that are the topic of our discussion today, which is seagrass and mangroves. I'll start by emphasizing a little point about those ecosystems. Despite this emphasis on seagrass and mangroves as carbon sinks, I think we should not see them in isolation. We always have to see them as part of larger systems that are interconnected, interdependent, and also that can suffer the cascading effects of any impacts that happen in the general environment, in particular from climate. We have to see them as global in influence. They are part of the global systems and they contribute towards the global sequestration of carbon. Various studies have demonstrated the connectivity and dependencies that exist between these systems and also other components of the ecosystem. For example, when you talk about sediment flows from the land side, they are connected to the populations of seagrass and mangroves that we have. We also have to be aware that these systems are liable to change over time. And very importantly, we have to acknowledge that we don't know enough about them. We know where they are, we know what they look like, we know what they're composed of, but we don't know what drives them up or down. So it's very important that we have to acknowledge this, and we don't do any alterations to those ecosystems unless we do know what we can do to actually help them to recover in case there are impacts. For Seychelles, prior to the 2020-21 update of the NDCs, while many countries recognize the potential of these blue carbon ecosystems, a few of them outline specific and measurable targets to harness that potential. Seychelles NDC was amongst the boldest and most specific in committing to translate the potential into action and outlining our commitments to map the full extent of these mangroves and seagrass ecosystems across our EZ and subsequently ensure protection of at least 50% of these ecosystems by 2025 and 100% by 2030. Now you ask me, what does 100% protection look like? And I think that could be a very interesting topic of conversation itself. Establish a long-term monitoring plan and include the emission values of these blue carbon sinks within our national greenhouse gas inventory, and ensure coastal planning and infrastructure are regulated at the national and local level to prioritize the consideration of blue nature-based solutions for climate resilience. And while we are proud to outline these bold commitments, little more than 12 months ago at COP26 in Glasgow, we have wasted no time in beginning with implementation. In August, we delivered on our first NDC commitment and became one of the first countries in the world to map the full extent of seagrass ecosystems across its EZ, and that's across 1.3 million square kilometers. I like the 1.4 million square kilometers. Some people, they say 1.3, but I'll round up to 4. 1.4 million square kilometers. And interestingly, yesterday we were in discussion at the Congo Basin, and Seychelles is considered a very small country in Africa, one of the smallest. But the Congo Basin is 4 million square kilometers, and Seychelles territory is 1.4 million. So in fact, when you look at the size of Seychelles, it is huge when in terms of an oceanic state compared to many of the countries in Africa. Globally, understanding the exact location and extent of seagrasses remains a challenge. It is very difficult to protect. We have to acknowledge it is very difficult to protect and manage something if you don't know where it is. So knowing where our seagrass beds are, knowing what interacts with them and who is interacting with them is very important if you want to protect them. This project in Seychelles, for which I would like to thank Pew Trust, Oxford University, the Seychelles Climate Change Adaptation Trust, and others for the support, provides significant methodological learnings to the increasing number of countries and partners looking to more accurately understand and protect the benefits these ecosystems provide. I would also pay tribute to the overall approach of this partnership, and I'd like to underline partnership. In particular, the focus on aligning international expertise and technologies with local organizations as you've seen in the video, helping to further develop the kinds of in-country capacities needed to effectively sustain long-term implementation. This has involved not only field research, trainings and workshops, but extensive outreach with communities and other users. Indeed, we now have the words to describe the different species of seagrass in Seychelles Creole. I think you know what Creole sounds like. It's a French Creole that we speak in Seychelles, and we could say a few words later on. Working with the Institute of Seychelles Creole, the Creole Institute of Seychelles, to designate these words, demonstrate a seemingly basic but a very fundamental step in properly valuing this ecosystem within the daily lives of our citizens. Implementation is a key theme to this COP. So I would like to share 3 key lessons in our experience in implementing the NDC commitments when it comes to seagrass and mangroves. The first one is partnerships. In just about every aspect, partnerships, Seychelles has the ambition, but we are working with a whole network of international and domestic expertise to make this happen. Partnerships that touch on new technologies and cutting-edge research, technical policy support, community outreach, innovative finance, and even developing the language for Seychelles Creole is what we are talking about. We have to find the right partners, we have to work with our partners, and in that way we can make things happen. The other lesson is that it's a long-term engagement. Working with SECAT, Pew and Oxford was not a 12-month project that delivered a report. It has spanned engagement with local communities to the application of cutting-edge satellite technology, and it has also helped further enable local skills and capacities which are continuing today and which we would like to continue in the long term. So working with seagrass, with those ecosystems, and working with their protection is something that we have to see as a long-term engagement that would carry on even after production of the first initial reports. The third lesson is that we have to be concerned about livelihoods. Carbon and reducing emissions is fundamental to why we are all here. But these blue carbon ecosystems, I think my colleague from Belize has also mentioned this point, it also support livelihoods and it protects homes and provides keystone habitats for a wealth of biodiversity. So everyone has a stake in those ecosystems, and we have to think about it this way. Seychelles, seagrasses, for example, in Seychelles are very important for a species of fish called rabbitfish, on which a lot of local coastal fishermen depend. So it is something that we have to think about when we're talking about seagrass. We have to think about the people who are interacting with those ecosystems, and in that way we can get them to become also engaged in the protection of those habitats. And indeed, I remember last month there was a proposal for certain developments on the coast, and one of the first objections that we had from local fishermen and local residents is that you will destroy the habitats that we rely on for our daily bread. So this is something that is very much on top of their agenda, looking after what's around them. And in that way, you don't need external agents to come and protect ecosystems. It's the people themselves who would do it. So for us, this COP represents another milestone in the growing awareness of the role that nature-based solutions, in particular ocean-based solutions, can play in helping address climate change. But we are now at the point where awareness must translate into action, and we all agree on that. I am proud that alongside the panelists here, Seychelles continues to take up this task and lead from the front, but now it is time to go further and faster, and I hope with your engagement we could do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. There's not enough time for me to agree with all the points you made, but I would. I think the 2 things I would stress from Minister Joubert's comments there are that in a typically understated way, Seychelles is on seagrass leading the way globally. Yesterday there was an announcement of a new $5.5 million partnership to expand the very approach that's been applied in Seychelles to seagrass mapping across the Western Indian Ocean. And it's the willingness of countries like Seychelles to take those leadership risks and opportunities that inspire that. The second thing I would really emphasize as well is we have yet, in 3.5 years of working on this, to find a fisherman that enjoys catching carbon. There is a understandable enthusiasm for these ecosystems for their carbon values, and I think it's quite right that they are called blue carbon ecosystems. but they protect people, they protect homes, they protect livelihoods. And when we're thinking about how best to protect, to restore, to manage these places, it's important we don't become myopic about those values. So thank you for that reflection as well. Rita, I'd like to offer you the floor.
Thank you very much, Tom, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here with the ministers of Belize and the Seychelles. First, I want to start by apologizing because my minister was not able to make it today. He is unfortunately not feeling well, but it's my pleasure to be here and to share with you a bit about Costa Rica's efforts both on a national level and international and regional level. I really want to thank Pew Charitable Trusts for all the support that you've been giving us both on a national level but also in all our international efforts, and I will speak a bit more about those international efforts in a bit. This event is crucially important at this moment, and I think that as we move also, I mean, now we are in COP27, but we are also thinking about a very important COP upcoming COP15, and making these connections and having these events are crucially important, and we very much appreciate you also inviting us to share a bit about our views. I want to share some elements just also beginning to say that I fully agree with my fellow panelists and the ministers. All what have been said before, we fully agree, mainly also on the fact that we need to focus on the implementation. We're in a moment where we have been very ambitious and we have been trying to push forward and increasing the awareness, but we now need to move into action. So I very much agree with the previous speakers. According to the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report, wetlands salinization is occurring at large. Rising water temperatures have led to shifts in plant species distribution, causing wetland erosion and habitat loss. These wetlands support biodiversity and have key ecosystem functions. Nearly 50% of global coastal wetlands have been lost since the 19th century, according to this report. 70% of this loss has resulted from weather events such as tropical cyclones, and our region is very much aware, and we very much are seeing those effects, and climate extreme events such as drought and heat waves that have negative impacts in these very relevant ecosystems. Coastal blue carbon ecosystem provide climate regulatory services through their carbon removal and storage. Protecting these very important ecosystems allow us to guarantee food security for these areas that are the nurseries of many species, as was mentioned in the videos. I want to share with you a bit of the efforts that we've been doing on an international level, and maybe when we move into the next sessions, I'll share a bit more about the efforts of Costa Rica within our NDCs and at the national level. But at international level, we have been co-chairing a coalition of over 110 countries, which is the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, that seeks the adoption of the protection of 30% of the world's land and ocean by 2030. We began the efforts of this coalition 3 years ago, and we're hoping to move forward into COP15 and adopt this very important target that, of course, would include the protection of these ecosystems as well. We believe that the 30 by 30 includes the quality of protection, prioritizing ecosystems that are vital and critical in terms of biodiversity and climate change. The target would include protected areas and other effective ecosystem measures, which are areas that are achieving the long-term and effective in situ conservation of biodiversity outside protected areas. We made this global effort 3 years ago, but last year we were also able to increase our national marine protected areas from 2.7, we went from 2.7 to 30.3%, and we are very proud of this. I think having this international awareness that has been risen, and also listening into the scientists and what the science are telling us, that protecting at least 30% is the minimum, has been key for us to both have this movement at an international level but also on a national level. We believe that the 30 by 30 opens the door to many opportunities for the ocean economy that rely on protecting and restoring these very important ecosystems. Making sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth improves livelihood and job and ocean ecosystem health, as was mentioned before. The fishery industry in particular will benefit as well with this biodiversity-driven and climate-driven ocean-based solutions. As was mentioned by the Minister of Belize, for us as well in Costa Rica, tourism is one of the largest sectors in the global economy, and this is also true of why we really need to protect these very important ecosystems that can help generate wealth for coastal and marine tourism activities. This ocean-based solution not only benefit climate change, but also serve as an important blue economy recovery tool. Blue carbon implies mitigation benefits for coastal ecosystem and has the potential of carbon uptake and storage at a local and national scale. And we therefore believe that carbon sequestration can very much bring opportunities to tackle climate change. I just wish to finish this first part by saying that we really need to move into the action, and we're very much in that route already. This is why partnering with Pew Charitable Trust, Conservation International, and many other partners that we have is so crucial, but also involving the indigenous people, local communities, and the coastal communities is very important for us, and we believe that this is key. So not only to have the climate crisis in the upfront, the biodiversity crisis in the upfront, but to make sure that we have people in the middle of all these different interconnected crises. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. Costa Rica's environmental credentials and leadership need no elaboration here, but we thank you for that continued work, and certainly all eyes on Montreal, and the great hope that we can make that leadership a requirement for countries. I would reflect the leadership that not just Costa Rica, but all our panelists have shown here is hugely credible based on their own actions, right? These are not targets that are set out to be aspirational. They are founded on real-world experience and real-world leadership, which is not always risk-free, it's not always cost-free, but it is that sort of leadership that is inspiring and hopefully successful, and we look forward to supporting you there. Colleagues, I, as you can hear, am British, which means that it is genetically inbuilt for me to be on time, and I don't want to abuse your time, not least because we have a fabulous close to today's session, but I'm going to take the liberty of posing one question to all our panel. It is mercifully now self-evident and obvious that people and communities are integral to how we think about these commitments. But I wonder if you wanted to reflect briefly on now, as we in this venue think about translating action into implementation, the importance of that continued and sustained engagement with people and communities in delivering these NDCs. Mr. Abbott.
Yes, certainly. I think that with the studies that have been done for Belize, for example, in terms of mangroves, but when we get into the study and looking at what we have in terms of seagrass, it will inform us to such an extent that we can also use that information to amend or upgrade our policies for environmental impact assessments, especially in regards to large developments, and so we can strengthen our EIA policies and regulations. Certainly we cannot do much in coastal ecosystems if we forget what is happening inland, and so our work with the work that we do for our ridge to reef projects are also very important, so that we can look at agricultural inputs into pollution, the issues of mining for sand and minerals is also key to what happens downstream. Hurricanes and flooding events that cause a lot of erosion also within the riverbanks and cause a lot of siltation into the marine ecosystem are also important, and we have to continue doing that type of work to strengthen it. But I also wanted to mention that Belize recently, through the assistance of TNC, also we have had the commitment for conservation of 30% of our marine resources, and we committed to implement this by 2026, so 4 years before 2030. So hopefully we are on the way to that type of implementation.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Joubert.
Thank you. I think we've talked about the importance of having communities in our consideration when we talk about protection of different ecosystems, and that's well understood. But I think from our point of view, from Seychelles, when we talk about communities, I think one of the important things would be we have to make sure we see this effort from the point of view of those people who are living and who are benefiting from that in that environment. We cannot have it from a regulator point of view. We cannot just see it from a government commitment point of view. It has to be seen from the point of view of the people who's living there, who's making a living from the use of that ecosystem. And in that way, you can actually devise measures that are much more in line with their interest and the interest of conservation at the same time. The second thing I would say about engagement with communities is that we have to make sure, we have to be very careful that we don't go for greenwashing or smoke screens. In many instances, we talk about engaging communities, but in fact, it is just a lot of noise and a lot of green paint that we throw over everything. So we have to make sure that we don't end up doing that, and because that would make you lose your credibility. And once you lose your credibility, it's very hard to get it back. So I think this is something that we have to be very careful about in Seychelles. In our engagement process, we try to be as frank and as open as possible. And we try not to go into really complicated discussions that are meant to get people off track. And just tell them the truth. This is what we have, this is what we're trying to protect, and these are the reasons why we're trying to protect it. And most of it has to do with you. The third point I would say is that we also have to accept that there are instances where we can have nature positive outcomes. And we also have to think about that. We cannot just be anti-development. I mean, take the east coast of Mahe, for example, the Mahe Island. We've had reclamations that's been done to expand the town area, fine. We've done a lot of destruction of coral areas. But in fact, we have actually gained a lot of mangrove ecosystems through that process. We have gained quite a lot in terms of mangrove, and the coverage has increased quite significantly. It's not the perfect way of looking at things, but it's one of those compromises that we can come up with when we are talking about development, because in the end we have to also think about the people who are living in that area, and they have to see themselves as gaining something. So sometimes it's a very tough, as you mentioned, it's very politically risky sometimes. It's a risky set of decisions that you have to make. It's a very fine line between getting something and not getting something, or being hated or being liked. But sometimes you have to take a stand and try and aim for the highest percentage of nature positive outcomes, but that you have to do something. You cannot just not do anything and assume that people would just say, okay, it's all natural, we just accept it the way it is. So there are those decisions that have to be made, and in my position, that's the hardest part. You have to tell people, like, look, I am the Minister for Environment, yes, but I am also the Minister for a country. So it's not easy, but I think with the data, for example, with information, with knowledge, you can do better decisions, and you can actually show how you can get those outcomes in a better fashion. Thank you. I can see you smiling there.
Again, I'm British, so I will keep quiet on data and talking to people. Rita.
Thank you. Maybe I'll view it in 3 different levels. I already spoke about the international multilateral level and the need of having this overall and a higher framework. Going into the national level and try to see how we can implement it at the national level, I just wish to share that Costa Rica updated its NDCs in 2020 and now has a clear targets for restoration, conservation, and sustainable development for carbon ecosystems. We have also a national commitment to develop and implement a blue carbon strategy, and we have one specific commitment made that is to protect and conserve 100% of the coastal wetlands included in the National Inventory Wetlands 2016-2018. By this, I say that we do those national implementation or those national programs, but we need to really make sure that we are including and making this process a participatory process with the community, and making sure that we integrate knowledge from local, traditional, and scientific communities. This is more of an overall and more of a whole of society approach that we need to look at it. I think that part is very important. So moving from the international level to the national level, then to the local level, making sure that we have coastal communities that are more aware, better informed about these efforts, and trying to include them in all our efforts. It's also important to include small-scale fisheries to understand the importance of all the efforts that we're making. And I think, as I mentioned before and was mentioned by the other panelists, partnership is critical. And I think that to achieve national global climate goals and action, as mentioned, we really need to build alliances to make sure that we have a clear pathway for an effective implementation. And I think this is very key. So as mentioned before, key partners such as Pew Charitable Trust, Conservation International, a lot of climate, meteorologic institute, conservation area system, national wetlands, trying to include all the different actors in our communities to make sure that the implementation is well put. So I will conclude on those different levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. So we will shortly move to our keynote close, but I also I just want to thank our panelists here. I smile, Minister, because your leadership, all three of your countries' leadership is hugely appreciated, but so too is your candor, your frankness. As you say, partnerships and some of these decisions are not always easy, they're not always straightforward. I've heard it said in a number of events here that a number of these partnerships are like marriages, and for those that are married, that's not always easy, but the highs and lows are worth it in the end, and I smile because I wish it were the case across all aspects of our work, but it's certainly one that makes me happy. I would ask everyone to show their appreciation for the panelists. And we're delighted to have an incredible perspective as a keynote close. So as we have heard on many occasions, the role of communities and the role of people in these processes cannot be underestimated. And we're thrilled that we're joined here today by Queen Kwet, Chiefess and Head of State for the Gullah Geechee Nation. Queen Kwet is a published author, a computer scientist, a lecturer, a mathematician, a historian, columnist, preservationist, environmental justice advocate, an environmentalist, a film consultant, the artivist, and founder of the premier advocacy organization for the continuation of the Gullah Geechee culture, the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition. Queen Kwet was selected, elected, and installed by her people as the first Queen Mother, the head Pundabodi, and official spokesperson for the Gullah Geechee Nation. And she will share with us her views on the culturally focused Gullah Geechee Communities Project and how that is helping to lead resilience and sustainability efforts within the South Atlantic Saltmarsh Initiative. Queen Kwet, please feel free to join us.
Why trouble the water? God, why trouble the water? Well, we today, and this thing was some of the children call Atlantic. Other rest of we call the Middle Passage. We there upon Nisha Island, from Jacksonville, North Kakalaki, to Jacksonville, Florida. All through that way, and just Atlantic did it. We got this thing they call Swatina. Other rest of the children call them Swatina. Grass, what did it? This time of day. Plenty we done way in town. Going out yonder would be cast net, cast out. Forget that thing for Nampon in the evening. Everything for shrimp, the sport, mullet, other rest of thing like that. Sunday children go on with it. Line. Forget the shark even. More men like this show. Now move fast, tall, and thing like that. They might pop the line. This your thing make me think about. The other rest of people with dip on all and all around the world. And what they done Nampon? How we done Nampon this year? When they say this thing called the climate, a change over all of we around the world. Just like when all the rest of people are kind of where we would be. And they hear we like this year. They know of us stand tall, so they want we for change like that. But then that kill me soul. Same way this year, change in the climate, that kill his soul of my heart. Now make them so there. It's so hard to burn up everything. Where you get for Nampon. Watch your neighbor, that make them so. The fishing thing ain't dead anymore. So what you going to do? So you stay when they crack your teeth like this year, then overstand tall. So we step out into the world with all the rest of people. We change up a little bit. And we even start to communicate in a way that others in the world might be better able to comprehend what we've said for hundreds of years on the Sea Islands in the Atlantic, from Jacksonville to Jacksonville. We made it clear that people shouldn't build in certain places on the coast because it wouldn't be sustainable. We made it clear that if you build there, it will harm the ecosystem that we feed ourselves from daily, not just by mouth, but by soul, by spirit. We made it clear that all of this we want to sustain for not just today, but for the generations coming behind us. But many people who were not of our culture didn't understand, as others would say, understand our language. They came in from their countries and said, because we didn't crack we teeth like them, then we have to change. Because we didn't speak the way they do, we should change who we are. But the more that we change into what they wanted to do, the more harm and damage we saw to our ecosystem, and the more harm and pain and hurt we felt along with Mother Earth as she cried out that the children aren't behaving correctly. So as we all know well, 2.5 years ago, almost 3, our mother spoke to all of us. And she said, go to your rooms and do what you're doing now. Sit down. Some did immediately, and others took a lot longer to catch on. And she said again, go to your rooms and sit down. And some sat. Some unfortunately fell, never to be recovered. And then people started to listen, not just to those of us like myself who are scientists by degrees, but they started to come to the true scientists, the true traditionalists, and say, what is it that you had been doing all along on your islands, in your communities, on your coast? How did you sustain your culture in spite of being in hurricane zones? How did you live in balance all this time with Mother Earth? We finally had the opportunity for the world to come to us and say, sit with us, talk with us, dialogue with us. And all the more we had to learn various ways to communicate who we be down young as Gullah Geechee, while holding on to our traditions and culture and balancing our world with that of the rest of the world. Unfortunately, it was the change of the world that brought us all together to change the world in a better way. And so we started working with a group in the United States called Surpass, who was working with a group that all of us are familiar with, Pew Charitable Trust, that said, there's something here on this coast besides Gullah Geechee culture. There's something in the environment that's helping to sustain this community, that could help sustain all the communities if we restore it and we protect it. And that thing was what some call Spartina grass, Some call Spartina grass, others simply say salt marsh. And where I'm from, that salt is in the air every morning when we go down to the edge of the shore, where there aren't gated areas blocking us out, because those who moved in wanted to keep the coast to themselves and blocked us away from our sweetgrass that we make our baskets from, our bulrush that we make other things from our herbs that grow naturally right along the intercoastal waterway. So I said to Pew, if you protect the salt marsh, you will protect the Gullah Geechee Nation, because we are the land, and the land is who we are. So we the land are we, the water to bring we, the water going to take we back. So we at it in the Gullah Geechee Nation. We know that the water is what connects us all as humans, whether it is the ocean or the body. We are water. So it's no doubt that here we would sit discussing water, the grasses that grow from it, in it, next to it, and water runs through it. And truly, as over your shoulder, Tom, nature is positive. Nature, that plus mark, as there's a mathematician, I haven't lost that. This is a plus to be here today with family from Belize, Seychelles, Costa Rica, sharing who we be as people of the islands, people of the sea, and how we are the grasses that grow together, united. And if the world could see us, and yet we hear us in our languages, maybe we can all speak together in one circle of connectivity, the way the ocean connects the world. And maybe we'd heal it, and it would no longer acidify, but instead the heat would not be heat island effect, but be the power and majesty and agency of the heat that we draw together in the circle. And we could ignite the world and be the power more than solar that is needed at this moment to heal Mother Earth. And maybe she would let us get up, rise together, and walk out to the shoreline where it's healed and blessed and restored. Thank you for letting me be here with you today.
Thank you, Queen Quet. We are privileged to work, but also learn with you, and that is true across all of our panelists and all of our projects. We have to be open-minded and to keep learning, to keep progressing. And I would just like to reiterate our thanks, Pew's thanks for that opportunity, and invite our audience one more time to express their gratitude for such a rich and insightful way to start your Thursdays. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you very much.